3 disturbing true school horror stories. Story 1. The Dorm Room Haunting, West Virginia 1. I grew up in a quiet little town in West Virginia, nestled among rolling hills and familiar faces. The college I attended was a small university, just a 15-minute drive from my childhood home. I won't name it, but it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Or so I thought. As a freshman in 2021, the world was still grappling with the aftermath of COVID, and it left its mark on my college experience. Most students opted for off-campus apartments, wary of dorm life, but I was from a modest background, and renting wasn't an option. So, I stayed on campus, eager for the full college experience, even if it meant long, quiet weekends in a nearly empty dorm. On my first day, I met my roommate. We'd texted a bit beforehand. The school had shared my number with her, which felt odd, but she seemed friendly enough over messages. In person, though, she was quieter, carrying a subtle air of entitlement. She wasn't unkind, just distant. One evening as we chatted, she mentioned everyone gets their own room these days because of the low student numbers. I had one to myself last semester, and now you're here. Her tone stung, but I brushed it off, changing the subject. I told her I lived nearby and would head home every Friday, returning Monday at 6 a.m. She nodded, saying little. Most weekdays she was barely around, spending nights at her boyfriend's dorm. The creepy part started my first Friday. I packed my bag, said goodbye, and drove home for the weekend. Monday morning, right on schedule, I returned at 6 a.m. My first class wasn't until 10, so I climbed into my thick memory foam mattress to catch a few more hours of sleep. About 10 minutes in, drifting off, I felt the edge of the bed dip as if someone had leaned against it. I froze, too tired to process it fully. A minute later, the mattress lifted back up. My heart skipped. Someone had been there. I turned, expecting something. But my roommate was in her bed, facing the wall, seemingly asleep. I chalked it up to exhaustion and drifted back to sleep. The next weekend followed the same routine. Home on Friday, back Monday at 6 a.m. Again, I crawled into bed, desperate for rest. But moments after lying down, the bed sagged again. Not just the edge this time, but the whole side, like someone was sitting next to me. My body went rigid. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I heard it. The distinct sound of someone standing, followed by a thud as they jumped off my bed. It was high off the ground. I needed a step stool to climb up. I held my breath, then dared a glance. My roommate was in her bed, facing the wall, just like before. My mind raced. Was I hallucinating? Sleep paralysis? No, I could move. Could someone else have gotten in? Impossible. We were the only ones with keys. I told myself I was overtired and forced myself back to sleep. By the third Monday, dread had settled in. I walked into the room, and there she was, lying in her bed, but this time facing mine, eyes closed, asleep. I climbed into bed, heart pounding, and tried to rest. 5 minutes later, it happened again. The bed dipped. Someone sat beside me. I squeezed my eyes shut, terror gripping me. Then, a hand touched the back of my neck. Not squeezing, just resting there, cold and deliberate. My heart felt like it would stop. I didn't move, didn't breathe, for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the weight lifted, and I heard the jump off the bed. I lay there, paralyzed by fear, before turning to look. She was back in her bed, facing the wall, as if nothing had happened. I bolted out of the room, called my mom, and told her everything. I skipped class, too shaken to function. She reported it to the school, and they let me switch rooms immediately. They offered to involve the police, but I declined. There was no proof, just my word. I only asked that they not assign her another roommate. In my new room, unpacking, I remembered things she'd said. A vague mention of a previous roommate who didn't stay long. No explanation why. And that locked drawer she once opened, filled with 10 or more prescription bottles, which she claimed were for a skin condition. I wondered if it was true, or if something else, medication side effects, a disorder, explained her behavior. A few days later, she texted, asking me to pick up a book and binder I'd left behind. I didn't care about the book, but agreed to avoid suspicion. My key still worked, so I went to the old room. She wasn't there, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I grabbed my things and turned to leave, only to find her standing silently in the doorway. I hadn't heard the door unlock. I forced a smile, heart racing, and brushed past her. She asked, "Where's your new room?" I lied, saying it was on the first floor. She pressed, "Which hall? Near the stairs? The office?" I mumbled vague answers, claiming I didn't remember, then lied again about it being near the stairs. I left, never looking back, and never saw her again. I considered telling her boyfriend, but was too scared. Even now, I wonder, was I dreaming? Hallucinating? I don't think so. Only we had keys. Maybe she was sleepwalking, a side effect of her meds. Or maybe, as my mom fears, she was testing how close she could get before I woke up, maybe even planning something worse. It's behind me now, but I hope she never had another roommate. Story 2. The Business Building Stalker. University of Huddersfield, 2021 to 2023. During my time at the University of Huddersfield, from 2021 to 2023, I learned that campus could feel like a different world at night. Huddersfield wasn't known for its nightlife, so students often stayed late in the library or 24/7 academic buildings, grinding through assignments. I wasn't one for late nights, but in my final year, an advanced statistics class pushed me to my limits. Our professor was infamous for brutal assignments, and with a major project due, my progress was lagging. My laptop was on its last legs, so I headed to the business building's computer lab, a quiet, isolated spot perfect for focus. Or so I thought. The business building was old, 3 stories tall, with a sterile silence that grew eerie at night. After 9 p.m., the second-floor computer lab was usually deserted. I arrived around 10 p.m., swiping my student ID to unlock the door. The building was colder than outside, reeking of cleaning chemicals, a sign the janitors had already come and gone. I settled into the lab, the hum of the computer and my typing the only sounds breaking the silence. I kept an eye on the clock, planning to leave before 1 a.m. Around 11:30 p.m., a loud door slam echoed from deep within the building. Not the front entrance, but somewhere down the hallway. I brushed it off as the air system or a stray janitor, but the cleaning crew was long gone. I kept working, trying to stay focused. Then came footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, echoing through the hallway. They weren't casual. It felt like someone wanted to be heard. I froze, staring at my screen, hoping they'd pass. Instead, the steps stopped right outside the lab door. I couldn't bring myself to look at the door's small window. My heart pounded as the handle rattled. Not a casual jiggle, but an aggressive, intentional shake, like someone was trying to scare me. The lab doors locked automatically at night, so I knew they couldn't get in, but the rattling went on for a torturous 30 seconds before stopping. The footsteps retreated, fading down the hall. I debated leaving, but stayed, desperate to finish my project, convincing myself it was just another student messing around. 10 minutes later, the sounds returned, not from the hallway, but above me. The ceiling had thin panels, and I heard distinct crawling or dragging, not the usual pipes. A tile shifted slightly, weight pressing down on it, followed by a slow creak, like someone was trying not to be heard. That was it. I yanked out my flash drive, stuffed my notebook into my backpack, and sprinted for the door. The hallway was dimly lit, fluorescent lights buzzing, my sneakers squeaking on the tiles. I speed-walked to the stairwell, trying not to run. As I pushed through the stairwell door and started down, I made the mistake of looking up. On the landing above, a man stood, not a student or professor. His clothes were baggy, torn, his face half-shadowed, but his mouth hung open in a wide, unnatural grin. He didn't move, just stared. I bolted, nearly tripping as I flew down the stairs, slammed through the first-floor door, and sprinted to the front entrance. My ID barely registered in time to unlock it, but I shoved the door open and ran across campus, not stopping until I was locked in my dorm, back against the door, gasping for air. The next morning, I returned to submit my project. The business building felt normal in daylight, but my stomach dropped when I noticed two ceiling tiles missing. One directly above where I'd been working, another in the corner I'd seen move. It was as if someone had been watching me, rattling the door to toy with me, then climbing into the ceiling when they couldn't get in. I dread to think what they planned if they'd reached the lab before I ran. From then on, I swore to get a new laptop and work from my dorm. Story 3. The Parking Lot Trap. UK, Annabelle's story, age 16. My name is Annabelle. I'm 20 now, and this happened when I was 16 at my high school in the UK, what we call college there. It was the scariest day of my life, and I'm not exaggerating. My school was newly built, deceptively large, but split into 3 parts. A high school, a nursery, and a special school for kids with learning disabilities. Security was tight. Everyone needed a lanyard with an ID card to get past the foyer and into most areas, except classrooms. The IDs had our names and photos, but kids often flipped them over for privacy. The scanner worked either way. On our first day, we were warned never to let strangers into the school. It was my second week, but only my second full day there. I'd been sick most of the week. During a geography class, about 20 minutes after lunch, I desperately needed the bathroom. I'd chugged a ton of juice at lunch, unable to take it to class, and it hit me hard. My teacher was annoyed. Bathroom breaks during class were frowned upon. But he could see I was desperate and let me go. The halls were empty. No one, not even teachers, roamed during class hours. I passed through the cafeteria's double doors, empty at this time, and went to the bathroom in a nearby room with more classrooms. On my way back through the cafeteria, I noticed a man sitting at a table. He wasn't a student, too old, and I assumed he was a teacher or parent. I kept walking, but he called out, "Hey!" I squealed, startled, my nerves getting the better of me. Embarrassed, I turned as he laughed and said, "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you." He wore a lanyard, but the ID was flipped, hiding his name and photo. Kids did that all the time, so I didn't think much of it, assuming he was a teacher. "I need help getting some work things from my car. Mind coming out for a sec?" he asked. I agreed without hesitation, thinking it was normal. We walked in silence through the foyer and out of the building. He seemed nervous, hands fidgeting, in his pockets then clasped together. I'm shy, so I didn't make small talk either. The car park was about 50 meters away, hidden by bushes until you were close. As we approached, he said, "My work stuff's in the boot. That's what we call the trunk here. Just need you to carry a couple bags back." I nodded, thinking nothing of it. He pointed to a blue car at the end of the lot. As we got closer, I saw movement in the back seat. 2 men, crouching, hiding. My heart stopped. I froze, and they must have noticed I saw them because the back door swung open. A man scrambled out, and the teacher grabbed my arm as I turned to run. I'm 5'2", underweight, and he was tall and large, but adrenaline kicked in. I yanked my arm free with all my strength and sprinted back toward the school. Heavy footsteps pounded behind me, but they stopped short. Maybe because the school's glass automatic doors were slow to open, and someone might have seen them through the glass. I burst into the foyer, ran to the open cafe by the library, and told the worker everything. She calmed me down, took me to a teacher's office, and they called my parents and the police. Security cameras in the lot caught the men, who were charged with attempted kidnapping. The man had used a student's dropped lanyard to get inside, flipping the ID to hide it. I didn't return to school for weeks and still attend therapy for the trauma. Writing this down helps me process it. It remains the scariest experience of my life. সবকিছু হুবহু এমন ছিল তেমনি রেখে দিলাম তুমি চাইলে আমি